want to stop paying rent. I need to stop paying rent. I'm tired of paying rent. I want my own home.
Hello, greetings from Castle Goring, from Nikki and from me. It's been an eventful few days. Yesterday I had to post a special video with regard to the Queen's birthday, but today I am back doing the normal videos. Okay, so if I may, I will plunge right in as we have quite interesting developments. But before starting, I need to eat humble pie. And I think it's very important to eat humble pie when you have it dished up for you and you deserve to eat it. So Olga Montero says, I watched the funeral. It was so touching. Rest in peace, Prince Philip. I am not a fan of Harry and his wife. But as they were leaving the pews, Harry did bow his head. He did it quite quickly. Watch him. He is behind Princess Anne's husband. Harry does it before Princess Anne's husband bows. I had to watch it a few times. Love you, Lady C and Mickey. Thank you for all your informative videos. Thank you, my dear. That's very kind of you. And in the same vein, Anna Bowings says, Lady C, I think you have missed the part where Harry did bow his head to the altar. You can see it here. And then she provides the link. And sure enough, at 1 hour 48 minutes and 50 seconds, when I looked at it again, Harry does bow. But it is really interesting because this is an absolutely ideal lesson of why in life, if you do not do things in a certain way and that you expect everybody to fall into line with you marching out of step with the band, that people might actually not acknowledge you as the great marcher that you are. Harry does not bow to the host in the expected way that he is supposed to. The reason why you bow or genuflect at an altar is because that is where the host is housed. So you are displaying reverence, and anything else is regarded as a mark of lack of respect. You are supposed to wait until you are in front of the altar where the host is, and at that point you do your due reverence. Harry, of course, who has, it has to be said, always been ill-disciplined. He was ill-disciplined as a little boy. He's remained ill-disciplined all of his life. So there's nothing new about this. Maybe it's been exacerbated under his wife's influence, and maybe he has come to the realization that his individuality can be developed by going against the grain and doing as he pleases. You know, the way to show I'm a good dancer is to dance out of step. That sort of way of thinking. He did bow. He bowed before Timothy Lawrence even reached the point at which he stopped and bowed. He bowed as he was approaching the altar. Well, no wonder I missed it, and no wonder so many people missed it, because he didn't do what he was supposed to do when he was supposed to do it. And I'm afraid, Harry, the world does not have to divert its attention and look for when you want to do things according to your scheme of things. No. When we go to the ballet, we expect the chorus to be in a line. Everybody should high kick at the same time if it's in a chorus line. And if it's in a church, you're not supposed to bow to the host as you are approaching the altar, and before you have even reached near the altar, and before the person in front of you has had a chance to reach his correct position and bow. You bow when you're supposed to. So on that basis, I would say none of us needs to feel any guilt for not having noticed it. Nevertheless, I stand corrected. He did do the due reverence, just not in the way he should have, and not how he should have, and not when he should have. So on that basis, we will plunge in, because several people have asked for my opinion on Harry's returning to Montecito the day before the Queen's birthday. Boiling it down, the thing they mostly seem to want to know is whether I believe he was rushing back to Meghan, or whether he realized it was pointless to stay any longer. Well, my understanding is that Harry's reception was hardly what one would call enthusiastic. That he quickly realized that this is not going to be an easy road to travel, that having thrown a muck at everybody, they don't trust him, they may love him, but they don't like what he's done. If you want an in-depth account of what I have been told, I am happy to give it to you. But at this point, I have not really been asked that, so I'm not going to go into this in any great depth. But, you know, let's put things in their proper perspective. Harry is really addicted to Meghan. You know, somebody who is hooked on someone else is going to want to get back as quickly as possible. But there is little doubt in anybody's mind that he came over with an agenda, and that the agenda was to see, let's see how much of the mine he could exploit. And he discovered he couldn't exploit much of it. And the opportunity wasn't there, and he was blocked at every turn. It was quite clear to him that this was not going to be an easy enterprise. But you can depend upon it that he was very carefully schooled in what he should be seeking and trying to achieve, and what his objectives should be. And when he realized that there was little point, because it wasn't going to happen, there was really no point in staying. You know, had the door been left ajar, had he been able to slither in, I'm sure that he would have stayed, and that both she and he would have been as one in maximizing the opportunity and exploiting it to their full objectives. However, it didn't happen. So he went back, and very sad, very sad. But also, you know, he basically knows that he's plotted his copy, and he's not really welcome. Let's call a spade a spade. Minerva wants to know, can you believe it, Lady C? Oh, Miss Scooby-Doo says Henry has utmost respect for the Queen and that he met with her for 2 private meetings. Since when did this nobody jerk have the right to speak to the British press about things that are none of his business? Time to sue them all for treason. Darling, you don't sue for treason. But I love the analogy nevertheless. There is room at the Tower to throw them in, lock the doors and chuck the keys in the Thames. Richard III did it. This time it is justified. Well, Minerva's allusion, of course, is to how King Richard III very conveniently managed to waft his nephews, the King Edward V and his younger brother, who was the immediate heir after him, the Duke of Gloucester, into, shall we say, a premature arrival in heaven. Well, I'm afraid, my dear, things are done quite differently nowadays. One needs to do it with politesse and finesse. You know, the direct approach doesn't work quite so well anymore. It causes problems. Oh dear. But had things been different, my goodness, wouldn't they have occupied a really nice suite in the Tower of London until they walked the short distance to where they would have, shall we say, been summarily dispatched? Oh dear, oh dear, the heart bleeds, the heart bleeds. Oh, you have to laugh, you have to laugh. It's not really funny, but you have to laugh. Josh Tara says, Dear Lady C, I love your eloquent delivery, good humour and thought-provoking commentary. I have also greatly enjoyed your books. Thank you very much. Here's my question. In his recent book, Clive Irving has pointed out that Prince Charles and Camilla are now making over 21 million per annum, pounds that is, on their Duchy brand food products, even though most of them do not contain any ingredients produced in the Duchy of Cornwall. In light of this, do you think it is hypocritical of the palace to prevent Harry and Meghan from profiting from their Sussex royal trademark? Or do you think the two enterprises are fundamentally different? But if so, then how? Thank you so much for your entertaining and enlightening programming. Thank you for your kind words. The two approaches and the two enterprises are as different as chalk and cheese. All of the income from the Duchy of Cornwall original sales goes back into the Duchy of Cornwall's coffers. The Prince of Wales, well, first of all, Camilla has nothing to do with this. It's completely the Prince of Wales. He is the person who is in charge of the Duchy of Cornwall, effectively. It's for his benefit. It was created by, I think it was King Edward II. Oh no, I think it was created by King Edward I for King Edward II, who was his heir, so that the heir to the throne would have an income that would be suitable for the sustenance of his position. It's not private money. It's effectively state money, and it is very carefully monitored. There is nothing that the Prince of Wales does commercially, or indeed any of the other working royals, nothing that any of them will do that is not carefully scrutinized and monitored. They can't come up with an idea and implement it without it going to effectively a committee which examines the possible consequences, the effects it's going to have, foreseen, possible, unforeseen, what the ramifications are going to be, not only financially but politically and in terms of the respect that the royal family is held in, etc., etc. This is where Meghan fell asunder, and this is where the whole of the problems arose with her and the royal family, and then with Harry and the royal family, as a result of his supporting her unreasonable stance in that she required full liberty to do exactly as she pleased, cut any deal she pleased, with no reference to the royal family, with no scrutiny, with no checks and balances. And they said no. And this is the kernel of the difficulties that have arisen since then. It's all about Meghan's decision to merge the royal family, commercialize and exploit her position financially, and do it without any monitoring from the royal family's advisors. The two things are so different. The Duchy of Cornwall, or indeed the other royals who work, Princess Eugenie, Princess Beatrice, Prince Michael. When the Duke of Gloucester was an architect, there is nothing they do, nothing that is not scrutinized, and if they are told no, they don't do it. The only things that they end up doing are things that they are told yes, they can do. And Meghan wasn't gonna be told no. And that is where the whole thing rose and fell. There is no analogy between what the Sussex royal team intended to do and what the Duchy of Cornwall marketing enterprise has been doing. Also, as I pointed out, and I will end on this note, Meghan and Harry's commercial activities have been calculated to go into their pockets, exclusively into their pockets, with some veneer now of humanitarian and charitable spin, but it's basically for them. The Duchy of Cornwall is for the Duchy of Cornwall, not for Prince Charles's pocket. So Clara Knott says, "Dear friend, Lady C and Meghan." Oh my dear, Meghan and I are both your friends. This is an interesting one. "I am going to tell you something, and if Meghan wants to reply, she should please send me a message on Instagram or Facebook or even Twitter. When Meghan was still working on Suits, she rented a place in Ely from a respectable English gentleman who has various properties there and other places. and who is married to the sister of a friend of mine. Well, she paid her deposit and some months of rent, then stopped paying rent. The landlord approached her and she answered, stating that he was to take the rent out of her deposit. From then onwards, she never paid any rent. I just do not know for how long, but the truth is she left the place rent. Please, Meghan, confront me if you want. Her name is spelt for Meghan's people's benefit and or Meghan's benefit, if she should be watching this, which I would hope she's not. But Claraknowt. She continues, you cannot sue me because you will lose. I was forgetting that the owner said he was going to call his solicitor, to which she replied, let's see whose lawyer wins. Well, I mean, we all know that the Rachel Zane way of doing things is slap him once and slap him again. And that Meghan became an expert on the law in all her years of playing Rachel Zane. It's like osmosis. And it has to be said, there is no doubt that she knows her way sufficiently around the law to have been exploiting it very effectively and to know her way around propaganda and the manipulation of a public profile, to have also been exploiting that up to an extent successfully. She does have a pretty good track record in terms of lawsuits. For instance, look at how the Mail on Sunday lost. Although there's some doubt that they would have lost had Mr. Justice Warby rendered his judgment a few weeks later. However, that's something else. Well, I do not know to what extent this is actually something that I can hold water with, let's put it that way. And I am compelled, for legal reasons, to make it absolutely clear that I am taking no sides in this matter, that I am not accusing Meghan of anything, that it would be interesting, however, if this is not true, that Meghan's people contact me and tell me that it is not true. Otherwise, I dare say one will have to think, oh dear, Meghan's one of those tenants. Oh dear. And I have to tell you, I've had a crooked tenant. I had somebody who moved into a house, paid the deposit, paid the first month's rent, and never paid any other rent. She was an American. She's a well-known grifter who actually changed her name to that of a famous banking family. She tried to lie to the court repeatedly. Several years down the line, she tried to lie again to the court to get the judgment suspended, saying that they were in default when they were not. She's a well-known con woman, and I'm afraid that this is the sort of behaviour that con artists do indulge in. Now, I'm not saying for a second that Meghan did any of this, but I would sincerely hope she didn't. And I would therefore hope that her people will clear up this confusion, shall we call it, before Clara not repeats this defamatory, and it is defamatory, claim elsewhere. Because if it is untrue, she should not be saying it, and she has posted it where tens, if not hundreds of thousands of people will have access to it. So it's beyond my control. And if it is not true, they should inform me that it is not true, so I can clear up this misunderstanding. Of course, if it is true, they're not going to inform me, are they? And we can draw our own conclusions from that. It will be yet another bit of icing on the cake. Suzanne C. says, "Good day, Lady C. I'm a recent subscriber to your channel, and after watching you, I decided that when I grow up, I want to be just like you." I wonder how old she is. Elegant, eloquent, and a voice for those who cannot speak for themselves. Well, my dear, thank you so much. I have a question. You've mentioned a number of times that Harry's wife is a talented strategist when it comes to keeping herself front and centre and creating disruption while she's at it. If the firm put you in charge of creating a counter-strategy and you were allowed to implement it while remaining within your well-advised legal boundaries, what would you do to neutralise Harry's wife? Very good question. And finally, does anyone besides me think of Patty Hearst and the SLA when it comes to Harry's, and I'm going to substitute the word that she used for arrival in the US? Poor Harry, more lost than ever. As we in America say, keep hitting them out of the park. Well, it's interesting that you mentioned Patty Hearst, because quite recently, a very, very well-known and very respected biographer in England made a very similar analogy. In fact, he made the identical analogy. And he believes rather more than I do that Harry is suffering from Stockholm syndrome. I think Harry is quite willingly surrendering to what I would call the lure of folie à deux. Whereas, folie à deux can be very damaging. It can be very, very awkward, to put it mildly. And there are many cases historically where folie à deux meant that a couple, whether straight, gay, romantically involved, or not at all romantically involved, but two people get together and they create havoc where one of them together on his or her own wouldn't. I think, for instance, of the famous case of Leopold and Loeb. Another one would be Bonnie and Clyde, just to mention two. And there has to be a meeting of not only the minds, but the hearts and maybe even the souls. And they spark each other off to ever greater acts of what are usually regrettable and destructive conduct. And they are completely enchanted with each other and with the power that their duality gives them. That's why it's called folie à deux. It's absolute folly, actually even madness, that the two of them have managed by intermingling to create. And these things usually end up very badly. But we can hope that Harry and Meghan's will not, that they will learn the lessons of life and that they will learn from their errors, but people like this usually don't. What would I recommend if I were the strategist who was briefed with neutralizing them? Well, I would tell you, if you have read The Prince by Machiavelli, you will know that a good ruler takes his nation's interests into account, and he puts the national interest before his personal compunctions, conveniences, or feelings. I would be very much like Metternich or Talleyrand or even Bismarck. I would take a leaf out of The Prince. In fact, I would use The Prince as a template. I would do whatever it takes to neutralize them. And it will take very little if you have the stomach for it. It's a 5-letter word beginning with T. Truth. Truth. I would make sure that I met fire with fire. I would show them that sunshine sacks amidst scabies, and even Joseph Goebbels are nothing compared with me once I swung into action. Because I would use everything that they do against them. The boomerang effect. It's very, very effective. All you need to do is have a strong stomach. And all you need to do is decide that no matter what, I will not succumb to pressure from you, that I am going to neutralize you. And every time you do something to me, I am going to make sure that you suffer the most adverse effects of the harm you intended for me. There is nothing more appropriate in life than letting somebody drink from the draught of hemlock that they prepared for you. It would be a doddle to do, and I would do it. And I'll tell you better. There have been 3 times in my life that I can think of offhand when people pushed me to the extent that I made sure that they understood that if they did not back off, that they were going to drink the hemlock that they had prepared for me. The very first time I did it was with my ex-husband, when he was trying to do the dirty on me while making a whole load of money, selling a whole load of lies about me. And I pointed out to him that if he continued, that he and his brother, who was orchestrating the whole thing, would fail, And after they had failed, I would still be his wife, and I would have him locked up, and I would throw away the key. And I meant it. And he knew I meant it. And at that point, he started to behave with a degree of decency to allow me to have the clean divorce that I had wanted. And he restrained himself for the next 6 weeks or 2 months, I think it was. 2 months. He restrained himself so that we actually ended up getting a clean divorce. Then, of course, they plunged back in. That was the first time. The next time was with my mother. And the third time was with a friend who tried the dirty on me after 35 years of friendship. And I simply did to her exactly what she had proposed to do to me. And I had her removed from the yacht that I had chartered. And as she was walking down the gangplank, escorted by the Turkish authorities, because I told her if she didn't leave willingly, I was going to press charges against her for assault. As she was walking down the gangplank, she said to me, "I can't believe you've done this after 35 years of friendship." And I said, "Renata, you seem to have forgotten that I am doing to you exactly what you tried to do to me and my children." I said, "And you did it all to show off to your frowsy friends how much power you had over me, and you've discovered you had none." I would be very resourceful in exploiting every mistake that they make, and I would reveal every inconvenient truth about them that there is to reveal, and I would make sure that it was done with an efficiency that would be breathtaking. I tell you, I learned a long time ago, you should be a wonderful friend and a formidable adversary. Cross people at their peril if they are decent. That's the lesson Harry and Meghan should have learned and haven't yet learned. They are taking advantage of the decency, kindness, and softness of his family and of her family. Because most people are basically kind and soft, at least up to a point. Well, I've learned in life, once you realize that somebody is your deadly enemy, don't hold back. You don't need to be too imaginative either. Because as long as you are in the right and you are the innocent party, the only way they can prevail over you is to be proactive. Just boomerang it all back at them. It works. Take it from me. It works. Joe Smith says, Lady C, do you think Doria is also narcissistic? As if she's not, why on earth hasn't she taught her daughter to keep her mouth shut? If she was a decent mother-grandmother, surely she would have had a good word with her daughter upon marrying H and explained to her that silence is golden. Got a problem, go direct to the family, etc., etc. And certainly not let the likes of Oprah interview her. What sort of mother is she? Well, with due respect to Doria, Meghan is a 40-year-old woman. She is middle-aged. She is not a child, and there is no reason for Doria to share any blame for the fact that Meghan misbehaves, as long as Doria is not encouraging her to do so. And we have no evidence that Doria has encouraged Meghan to do so. I do not think that any mother would be able to convince any child of theirs who had a moral compass, a sense of decency, and a heart to behave in a heartless manner. I do not think that any mother, no matter how much the child loves the mother, would be able to convince a child of integrity to behave in an unscrupulous way. If somebody is behaving negatively, badly, unscrupulously, destructively, mendaciously, treacherously, you can depend on it. It is because that person has those characteristics within them. I think we need to understand in life that each of us is responsible for our own actions and our own choices. And shifting blame does not absolve the perpetrator of the responsibility which is his or her due. And on that note, I will say last question. Michelle B. Michelle B says, I'm not certain that Meghan exercised any wisdom in not attending the funeral. I suspect she wasn't invited, and like a true narcissist, she wrote history by implying it was her decision all along. Very astute of you, my dear Michelle B. My understanding is that Meghan was only too aware that absolutely no one wanted her here, and that she understood that if she came, she was going to be like a leper attending the court of Herod Agrippa, and that she would have been treated accordingly, but not superficially. She knew that had she attended, people would have shied away from her unless they absolutely had to speak to her, at which point they would have been as frosty as they could possibly be, making their displeasure quite apparent in a civilized manner. And on that note, I will say thank you very much for listening. If you have enjoyed this, please like, subscribe, share, press the notification bell, and do please keep the questions coming in. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.